Gravity Nerds, DIY volume kits specifically designed for your garage woody. Hey guys, I'm Kevin with Gravity Nerds, and today we're coming at you with an assembly video for the Wedgie volume. You can see a completed one in green right here on the wall behind me, and right here in front of me is the contents of the kit that you would get if you were to purchase one of our Wedgie volume kits from Gravity Nerds. We got T-nuts, all the faces for our volume, our corner brackets, and then there's just a couple things that you are going to need to find to complete your construction, namely some wood glue, possibly a hammer, mallet, number 5 Camelot, something you can whack with. That's going to help the process, and that's about all you need. So let's get started. All right, so the way these kits go together, it is pretty simple. They're all 90-degree angles that you're going to be assembling. So that's a pretty easy angle to get to put together. So here we go. First of all, I'm going to get rid of all these pieces except for the largest face. I'm just going to set this aside. And what you're going to notice in this face is all these brackets seat just like that in all of their pockets. So I'm going to go through and apply glue to all the faces of these brackets and glue them down, but just on one side. So this side is going to glue to there. I'm not going to put glue over there yet. So I'm just going to show you gluing up one of these, and then I will do the rest off camera. So you can imagine how this thing fits in the hole, and you want to just apply the glue on all the faces that are going to touch the faces of the volume here. And I'm just kind of spreading that out with my finger. And then I'm going to get that seated in its slot, just like so. Now the mallet would be, if that doesn't go in, now I'm gonna wipe my finger on the bottom of my workbench. If that doesn't go in on the first try, you can just give it a little tap. If you do tap on it, just make sure that it's seated all the way across, all the way back here and all the way up there. Couple taps for good measure, and there you go. You might wonder why these holes are kind of like bow tie sort of shaped here, and the reason for that is these are CNC cut. So the CNC machine is a round bit, so an outside corner, it can go zzz, zzz, and make that a perfectly crisp 90-degree angle. An inside corner, on the other hand, it can't do that because, like I said, it's a round bit. So to get that sharp corner right there, we need to overcut on the corners to compensate for the way the CNC processes it. So if you're just wondering what those little cutouts are for, that's what they're for. So I'm going to go ahead and apply glue and seat the rest of these off camera, and then I'll join you back when I'm done. Okay, all my brackets are seated in the largest face, and everything's nice and flush and looking good. I went through and I wiped away the squeeze out just with my finger, just kind of neaten things up, make it look nice. So there you have it. So I'm going to go ahead and give this ample time to dry. I'm going to be fitting the other sides and pushing a little bit on what's already set here. So I want to give this a nice amount of time to dry so that I can push against it confidently and not knock all these brackets out of place from where I just put them. So a couple hours here, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. My microphone quit working for this part of the video, so I'm just going to voice over, oh yeah, you put the thing over here, and you know, I think all I do in this section is just fit that face and put some glue on some stuff, so we're just going to go ahead and skip forward to the next part. All right, now it's time to install my last 4 brackets on these holes that remain, and then when they're nice and dry, these are going to go on the insides and made up with those brackets right there. And I'll put these on now because it's the end of the day. I'm going to go home here pretty soon, and I want these to dry overnight because when I pop these pieces on, I'm going to use just a little bit of tapping with my mallet here to get them seated nice and flush, and it'll be great if these have had 24 hours to cure so I can tap against them and not be worried that I'm going to bump them out of place. So here we go. All right, our volume has sat overnight to dry, so now we are ready to install the final faces. All these brackets are looking really good, so we're going to take these faces right here and just apply some glue as we have. And by now, you're getting tired of watching me do this, so we will fast forward. Okay, I think I have glue spread on most of the surfaces that are going to be joining together, so let's go ahead and start tapping this side in here. Now, you might have to just push and pull a little bit to get the face to just slot on. I'll turn that around so you can kind of see, whoops, there goes the camera. Turn that around so you can kind of see what's happening here. And I'm just gonna use this mallet to tap that into place. Get good contact with everything here. So that's looking pretty good. So it really is as simple as that. I'm gonna go ahead and do the other side, and then we will look at some final steps. All right, it's been a couple hours and those brackets are nice and dry. Now I'm gonna go ahead and mix myself up some putty to fill just a couple gaps. As I was looking around this volume, it really is pretty good. The gaps are very minimal, but a little bit of work with putty will make things easier in the long run with sanding and painting. So as you can see, there's nothing magical or special about the putty. It's just wood glue and sawdust. I did include a little bag of sawdust in your volume purchase, and this sawdust is collected from the actual plywood that your volume is really made out of for optimal color and texture matching. I'm just kidding. That's just the sawdust that we have a lot of in the shop. It comes from the CNC machine and the table saw. If you have access to sanding sawdust, some of your palm orbital sander type things have a little dust catchment system, and if you can get that sawdust, for my money, that will make a better paste because it's a little smoother. It's a finer grain size. This stuff is okay, it works, but that other stuff might just make your job a little bit easier, a little bit faster. And what we're really trying to do here is get this stuff in these pretty fine little cracks, so that can just make that a little easier. So if you've got that available to you, use that to make your paste. But if you don't, that's okay. This stuff will work. You just have to have a little bit of patience to really work it in those cracks and kind of push it in there. And I do try to force it in there just a little bit because we're going to take a lot of this down with the sander in our next step. So by pushing that paste in there, pushing that putty in there, you will ultimately make that joint just a little bit smoother. So the more work I do here, the easier my job will be in sanding and then in painting. And if there's any imperfections in the plywood, feel free to fill them with putty or leave them. It's plywood, so I'm okay with things looking like plywood if they're made out of plywood. They should have knots. They should have, I don't know, different things going on. It's not plastic, it's plywood, so it's okay for it to look like that, in my opinion. But your aesthetic may vary. So anyhow, I think that's really all I need to do with my putty. If you go through and squeeze off any extra, your dry time will be a little bit reduced. So sometimes just doing a little bit of that can help you out in the long run if you're just a little impatient like me. So there we go, puttying done. All right, I just got in from sanding outside and things are looking great. Real happy with how this is turning out. Just a couple notes on sanding. Go ahead and round those corners quite a bit. You really don't want anything sharp there. Additionally, the corners down at the bottom and like these corners, round those pretty heavily too. Even this corner down here, you might be thinking, oh, I've got a nice crisp angle down here. It looks great. Well, it's not gonna look great forever, especially I drop these things on the floor, whatever, and it's gonna ding it up pretty quick, especially a really sharp edge like this. Go ahead and sand that down, round that off. It'll be just a little bit stronger and more robust. The last step here, if you weren't going to paint, would be installing the T-nuts. So we're going to take a look at that in just a second. A quick note on painting. If you're choosing to add paint and texture, a great way to make your volume look wonderful, get that finish to it. A couple considerations there. Do you want to add paint and texture? I've got a video discussing those points and talking about the pros and cons of painting versus not painting, a link below. If you do choose to paint and add texture, you might consider the Gravity Nerds Grit Kit add-on to all of our volume purchases. We include our aluminum oxide blasting grit as well as wood glue and latex paint, which I have found is the simplest, most cost-effective way to get a great looking professional finish on your volumes. But anyway, enough about painting. Let's take a quick look at T-nuts. And not too much to say here, so we will be just a little bit brief. You got all your T-nuts in your bag, in your shipment, and they obviously just fit into all of these holes. The few things I'm going to say about the T-nuts is just don't overdrive the screws. So here I'm going to use a drill with a variable clutch, and I'm going to set it down pretty low. I've got it on 2 right now. Your numbers will vary. But if the clutch engages when that screw bottoms out, you're just about on the right setting. If the screw keeps spinning after it's all the way in that bottom spot, you're actually going to strip out the screw hole, and your connection will be less strong. So anyway, not the end of the world, but just a little consideration with the torque with which you drive your T-nuts. I'll go ahead and drive all the T-nuts on this thing, and then we'll take one final look. All right, a final step on preparing our climbing volume here is the screws that we're going to use to mount it to the climbing wall. So what I'm going to do is actually go and pre-drill the pilot holes for these screws. And I've got one of these countersink bits. If you've got that, fantastic. If you don't, that's okay. Just use a regular old drill bit. But I'm going to go ahead and pre-drill these screw holes, and there's a reason for that. And the reason is this: I want them all at a pretty consistent angle. If I am just trying to drive these straight into the wood while I'm holding this thing up on the climbing wall with one hand, you know, the chances of these all going in the same angle is pretty low. And the reason I care about the angle with which this is going through the volume is that is going to affect how much thread actually gets into the climbing wall. So you just want to make sure you get lots of screw thread embedded in your climbing wall so it holds your volume on tight. And you can see how much screw thread you have. We can just drive this bad boy in here, and we'll see how much comes out. And yeah, okay, that's a nice amount of screw, so I'm happy with that. That's going to hold the volume to the climbing wall just fine. A couple other notes on screw selection. This screw right here is a number 8 construction screw, and this screw right here is a number 6, and I would call that like a drywall screw. So you see these in climbing walls and especially home walls, and obviously there's a strength difference between these two. You can see there's just a lot more material with this screw. So I think about these guys kind of like a rusty 1/4 inch bolt that you might clip when you're sketched out on lead. Will it hold you when you whip on it? Maybe, I don't know, but I would definitely feel better if I was clipping something that's a little beefier. So I think you should use the same philosophy when you're choosing your mounting hardware for these volumes to make sure you've got plenty of strength to hold that onto your climbing wall. The strength of any of this joinery isn't going to matter if this thing doesn't adhere you know, firmly to your climbing wall. So go ahead and use a nice beefy screw. Make sure you're getting plenty of that screw into the plywood so you have a nice secure connection. I'm going to recommend 2 screws per side of your volume. So this volume has 4 sides, so that's going to be 8 of these bad boys, and that is more than enough strength to keep everything anchored. Thanks for watching. Head to gravitynerds.com and check out our other DIY volume kits and some other cool stuff.